thank you very much for inviting me to the to your conference. Our topic today really is not solely based on Airbuses and Boeings. What we thought is that we would be giving a background on making your private jet unique, the process of doing it, both from a completions and from a refurbishment standpoint. So what I would like to do is just basically move through the slides and be able to then show you what's going on. I am having a small problem with the slides. They're not turning. There they are. There they are. So let's first talk about aircraft completions, just to make sure that everyone is aware of what we're talking about. There's really two types of aircraft completions. One is if the buyer or the client decides that they want to purchase an aircraft from the original equipment manufacturer, then the business jet manufacturers, that is mainly Bombardier, Dassault, Gulfstream, and others, they will provide you with a catalog, much like you would when you're outfitting your Mercedes or your BMW. They give you a number of items that you can choose in terms of layout, in terms of systems, such as communications or in-flight entertainment. They will also give you a selection of fabrics and finishes to the airplane so that you can actually, as a buyer, pick and choose exactly what you want to have for that airplane. If you're getting a large cabin aircraft, for example, an Airbus or a Boeing aircraft, then it's a little bit different because you're buying that airplane green. And green means the color of the primer on the outside, which means that the aircraft hasn't been painted and it has a completely empty interior. So those are the two bases for aircraft completions. Basically, what that means is that if you're getting into the market for the very first time and you want to buy a brand new aircraft, the least risk, the easiest way to do it is to go directly with a manufacturer, again, Boeing, Gulfstream or Bombardier, and pick out what you want. The only disadvantage really to that is you are limited on your selection. If you want to do something that is not in the catalog, the manufacturers will charge you quite a premium in order to be able to do that. When we're outfitting a large aircraft, such as an Airbus corporate jet, or a Boeing BBJ, narrow body or wide body, that is the upper end of the market. As I said, the aircraft has a completely empty cabin. This, as a client or as a passenger you've never seen before, there are no seats in the airplane. There are no galleys. There are no lavatories in it. So what you need is you require a team of people to design that interior, install it, and certify it. So you'll be working with a designer, a completion center, various suppliers, and an expert completion manager such as ourselves to basically design and engineer and fabricate that whole interior. The unique item there is that within the limits of customization and certification, that you can create a bespoke interior that matches your requirements. So if you decide that you like the color red, or that you like to have high gloss black finishes, or you want to have a mahjong table in the middle of the aircraft, those are all things that can be done for you. So essentially, if it can be certificated, if it can be made safe, then it can be done. When we speak about an aircraft refurbishment, that is what's starting to become very, very interesting in the marketplace right now, especially with new clients and new buyers coming into the market. The advantage of a new aircraft is it's brand new. But the disadvantages are you're paying a premium for a brand new aircraft, much like you would with any other new item, but you are also having to wait until that aircraft is completed and that you can put it into service. So there is a premium for that and a requirement to be patient. However, aircraft refurbishments are something that is very good investment and represents a tremendous amount of value. If you can imagine when you buy your brand new car and you drive it off the lot, you're losing a substantial amount of money right from the very beginning in terms of value. But if you purchase an aircraft that has already 5 to 10 years of age on it, the aircraft that we're talking about don't fly that many hours. And if you were to compare them against a commercial aircraft, it would be often the equivalent of only having been flown for 1 year. Now, these airplanes, corporate aircraft, they're taken very good care of. You know, often they're put in a hangar. They have a maintenance manager that takes care of them. They get tucked in at night and they get a kiss to make sure that they get good sleeping. So they're in good shape. They are not like the average airliner that's parked outside and flown and worked very, very hard. So that means this aircraft has depreciated in value, but essentially it is still in many cases a very, very young aircraft. It also means that with regards to the newness of the aircraft or the features, Aircraft don't change their capabilities that quickly. They get upgraded over time. But if you compare it to cars which have facelifts and new models coming out all the time, it's a much, much slower process. So you may be able to buy an aircraft that is 5 years old that is still being built today and is exactly the same aircraft. Now, there's several types of refurbishment that you can consider. The simplest means is much like you would when you buy a new house. You would refresh the interior. You may paint the walls. You may put in different carpeting. You may do some finishes, some changes to the finishes. A more complex refurbishment would involve you perhaps saying, okay, instead of having seating for 14, I want seating now for 15 people, or I want to reduce the seating, or perhaps I want to not sleep on a seat. As the owner of the airplane, I want to have a decent bed in the airplane. So these are all things that you can do. You can also, of course, upgrade the in-flight interior, the in-flight entertainment system. That's very important nowadays, as well as the communication system. Everyone is now wanting to be connected all the time, and some of the older systems couldn't do that. The newest ones can do that. They'll give you worldwide global coverage. You can do your emails, you can surf the internet, you can do video conferencing, for example. When we talk about a light refurbishment, just to go over it quickly, these are things that can be done relatively quickly, depending on the type of aircraft, and provided that you don't pick some incredibly exotic materials, you can get this work done anywhere between about 4 to 6 weeks of downtime. It means that you're taking the seats out, you're reupholstering them, you're taking a look at all the veneers, and much like if you had a beautiful piece of furniture at home that had a scratch on it, it would get reworked to remove that scratch. What's very important is people want to make the aircraft part of them, like you would do for your office or your home. So colors get changed, finishes get changed, fabrics get changed. But again, it's a relatively light and I won't say inexpensive, but not that expensive a project to do. The heavy refurbishment is going to take you more time. It definitely requires more planning. Elements of a heavy refurbishment may include repositioning things within the aircraft. As I said, as a recent example, putting a bed into the airplane. It's going to require customizing that aircraft to suit exactly what you're looking for, and can include a myriad of things, from ripping the entire interior out because you got such a great deal on that airplane and doing a brand new completion, to variances of that all the way through it. Now, what's important is when you want to go through this whole process of either completing an aircraft or refurbishing an aircraft, you will find as a client or as an advisor that the owner will trust their pilot, and they'll trust their financial advisor, and they'll trust their lawyer. These are people they have had relationships for a long time with, and they have skills within their areas, but they're not skilled at aircraft completions or refurbishments. And to be fair, each of them have an enormous amount of strength, a lot of depth, and very importantly, they understand the client, which is important. So what we have to do is we have to respect one another's knowledge, and the owner needs to then bring in an expert to manage the entire completion or refurbishment. That person is called a completion manager. That is a service that Canberra Aviation Management, my company, does. And being able to work with those 4 people plus the client is incredibly important, because what we're able to do is understand what the client requires and turn that into reality. So let's take a look at putting it together. Here's a really good example of the kind of quality things we look at. Many people may look at this and say, well, the stitching is fine. Well, not really. The types of quality that we look at is to make sure that everything is absolutely straight, that it looks perfect, and that it is pleasing to the eye. That's the definition of quality for us. So let's start putting it together. Again, whether it's a completion or a refurbishment, there's many, many aspects that are very similar. So the first thing that we have to consider is that the new owner or the buyer is not generally an aircraft professional. So they're going to require expert guidance. And in many cases, those people will seek that guidance because they're used to getting guidance to be successful in life. Before we launch the program, it's very, very important to understand what is the client actually looking for. Now, that can be done with a questionnaire, but in my personal view, the best way to do it is to sit down with the owner, especially with their spouse or their business partners, and to sit down and really understand what do they want to do with the aircraft. Is this airplane going to be used for very long missions? Are they going to carry many people? What are their expectations for the journey, and how should it be? Do they intend to do a lot of business on the aircraft? And it may become very important, for example, to have video conferencing. Do they want to have more of a relaxed atmosphere because this is what they're using to go to their second, third, or fourth house? Or will they be sleeping on the aircraft? These are all things that have to be considered to make sure that the aircraft, when it is finished, actually meets their requirements and expectations. So we tend to have a series of open, comfortable discussions over a coffee or over dinner, discussing these things and understanding what the client is looking for. Importantly, if they've had an aircraft previously, or this one, in fact, that we're going to be refurbishing, what we can do then is start asking them questions on what are the tight points, like a suit. When does it not feel comfortable for you? And what are things that you would like to have? We can then start discussing options, we can discuss budgets, and we can discuss timelines. And essentially then, by the end of that, working together with the client and his advisors, and also with a respected designer, we start to define the cabin, the systems, the basic livery. We recruit a designer, and we begin then to make 2 and 3D renderings of the interior. Now, again, if we're doing a very light refurbishment, the designer would be doing really not much more than advising on fabrics and colors within the aircraft. But if we're doing a complete reconfiguration, or we're doing a brand new completion, then the designer is essential for taking those ideas and transforming them into a layout that is going to reflect the requirements of the owner, and also their expectations and their sense of taste. So we'll define things like finishes, quality standards, for example, the galley, what kind of systems are going to be in there. As you know, living in Southeast Asia, putting very good, high quality finished Chinese food from your favorite restaurant into an oven is not going to result in a tremendously good meal. Instead, what you want to do is perhaps have the ability to cook live and fresh on board by having a chef. And on an Airbus or Boeing or even a Gulfstream, there's room for that. Or alternatively, that beautiful meal that you've purchased or had catered to the aircraft, you may want to use a steam oven to make sure that the freshness and the taste is still there. Importantly is we have to understand from the client's point of view, not only what they want, but what they're able to pay for and what their expectations are in terms of downtime. Again, a client that may want to have the aircraft very quickly may have to take into effect that not everything that they want to get done can be done in that short time period. So we have to be realistic. For completion, what we want to do is start doing the engineering and the preparation and the design work well before the aircraft arrives. And there's a very simple reason for that. If we have all of that work done in advance and we've already selected the completion center, then what happens is the airplane comes out of manufacturing from the manufacturer, Airbus or Boeing in this case, and it transitions immediately into the completion center and the work gets done. The period of time required and the patience that the buyer requires is going to be much, much shorter. At the same time, if you took that airplane and accepted it from the manufacturer and then parked it for 6 months so that you could do all of your engineering, well, that is not only going to be wasting time, but you have an incredibly expensive asset that you can't use that you're paying for in that time period. So it is very important that you try to do this as efficiently as possible. And again, that's when you bring a good expert completion manager in to be able to help you with that. Now, once we have a very clear understanding of what the client wants, we write a very detailed cabin specification. And in many cases, people will say, why are you spending so much time to write an exact specification of what you want? Well, it's quite simple. By having an exact specification, we can then go to the various completion centers that we believe are competent and are capable of that aircraft type. And we can ask them for a bid, a request for quote. On the premise of having a very clear understanding of what the completion center has to deliver, they can sharpen their pencils and make a very, very good bid for us. If, on the other hand, you have a very relaxed or vague specification, the completion center is going to be forced to put an extra margin, an extra cost on top of that to cover for eventualities. That's something we don't want to do. We want to make sure that we're taking what the client wants and we put it into the aircraft. So we write an exact specification, we negotiate hard and fairly with the completion center under the understanding that if the client, as we're moving along, decides to change something, perhaps a fabric, perhaps a position of a seat, that will be related to a change order, and that change order may cost and may affect the schedule of the program. So as long as we do that, we start getting rid of all of the potential for strife between an owner and between the completion center. Everyone knows what the owner wants, and the completion center knows what they're going to be delivering on time and on what budget. Now, what's important is during that whole build out of that aircraft, the completion manager is going to be on site. And the reason for that is to be overseeing what is happening, to answer those questions that inevitably occur. Remember, we're essentially building a prototype, a one-time aircraft for that one client. So things will happen. And by being on site and being able to inspect things and check that everything is working at the right time and being installed correctly and has the right quality and finishes, you're going to be having an aircraft that is a very high standard. You're not going to have surprises at the back end. The aircraft will be certified on time and without any surprises again. And we'll be able to make sure that the client is going to be very happy with that. One other way to make sure the client is conscious of what they're going to be getting is not only to have 2 and 3D renderings of the aircraft, but some people are now asking for virtual reality images, which means that the client can actually put a headset on and we can put a 3-dimensional design of the aircraft on the screen for them, and they can actually virtually walk through the aircraft. That's very, very helpful for clients that are not used to working with drawings, that maybe have less experience in architecture or in yacht building. And it allows them to get a spacious feeling of where things are in the airplane. Is there going to be enough room for me to be able to walk between 2 areas of the aircraft? Would I be bumping into things, for example? Or is the table too large or too small? So those things are all very important. And again, de-risk the whole program. Most clients want to be kept aware of the aircraft, where it is in the build. So what we normally do is we provide a briefing once a week to allow them to see where we are, any of the issues that are occurring, and to take care of the inevitable questions that are there. Surprisingly, there are some clients that say, look, get the airplane done, tell me a week in advance, and don't send me any pictures. I want to be very surprised. And that's an interesting way to do it too. It's a little bit more stress for us because we're really not absolutely 100% certain everything is going the way the client wants it to. But the expression on the client's face when we do it that way is normally one of complete awe and a little bit like opening presents at Christmas. Now, when we are overseeing the completion, we'll be working very closely with the designer, the completion center, many of the suppliers. For example, when the first seat is being upholstered, one of our team will actually go to the upholstery shop, we'll check that seat, make sure everything is absolutely right. And if there are any problems, like you saw in the earlier image, those quality issues will be addressed on that first aircraft, on that first seat, to make sure that every subsequent seat is going to be exactly what you want. Inspection throughout the outfitting is crucial. We've had a very recent example of a gentleman who ordered an aircraft. He did not have a completion manager on site throughout the whole program. In fact, didn't even have one. And we found out that by the end of the program, what the client had actually been expecting and what the completion center delivered were 2 totally different things. And unfortunately, it ended up in a bit of an argument and difficulties between both parties. That's something you don't want to have. So what we want to do is be on site, make sure that we're checking that everything is being done. There are no surprises. The completion is done on time, the aircraft is certified, and that we're able to put the aircraft into service. One thing we do also during that time period is we check back with the owner to make sure that everything is in place for the aircraft to actually be operated, that you either have a management company or you've hired your pilots and your flight attendants and put the infrastructure in place so that there are no hiccups, so that as soon as the aircraft is finished, it can be put into service and the client can be enjoying their new aircraft. When their certification is done, that's the most time-intensive part of the program, and we've got the aircraft ready for delivery. Canberra will be doing the technical acceptance of the aircraft. We'll then be working with the client and their financial advisor and their lawyer to make sure that all the paperwork has been done properly. And then it's time for the client to be able to go and fly that aircraft. Many times they'll fly it once just before the aircraft gets actually physically accepted. And I have to say, it's a wonderful time in a program. It's time to celebrate the achievement, the workmanship between all of the members of the team, and a time to enjoy the client's smiles. And it's the best part because the client is happy, and you've built a wonderful aircraft that is going to be used for many, many years. So that is the end of my presentation, and I'm open to any questions that you may have.
Thanks very much, Tom. A good overview on aircraft completion for business jets. And just wondering, I suppose budget-wise, it's a lot, as long as a piece of string, but can you give us some idea of a typical completion on either a BBJ or on the Airbus private jet?
Sure. So if you're buying a brand new Airbus, let's say A319 Neo or a Boeing business jet, MAX 7 or a MAX 8, you're looking for the green aircraft of very roughly, depending on what you're looking at, somewhere between 60 and $70 million. And it's fair to say, depending on the interior and depending on what you want to, the features that you want to put, you can budget anywhere from about $25 to $40 million to complete that aircraft. Now, the follow-on question is clearly, well, what's it going to cost if we did the same aircraft pre-owned? And if you're going to have let's say a 10 or 15-year-old ACJ 319 or a BBJ 1, you'll be able to purchase an aircraft in good condition, so a good pedigree, we call it, for somewhere between $15 and $20 million. And depending on what you have to do on the interior of that airplane, again, you try to find one that's close to what you already want so that you don't have to invest quite as much. You'd be looking at anywhere between about $5 and $15 million. So to look at a turnkey finish on that, you'd be looking at an airplane that's going to cost you all up between 20 and let's call it 30 or $35 million. I think it's interesting, Alan, when you look at it, because for that amount of money, you can't buy a new long-range aircraft like a Global or a Gulfstream. So it represents a huge amount of value. And what's very interesting and what very few clients understand or would think is that both of those airplanes, from a maintenance and operating cost, are roughly the same cost as a Gulfstream or a Global to operate. They use a little bit more fuel, but their maintenance costs are going to be lower simply because they're based on commercial aircraft.
Very good. In terms of the region we're talking about here today, China and Asia, are there any VIP completion centers in the region that you're aware of?
Yes, HAECO does some work. They're quite good. They don't quite have as much experience as the well-established European centers or the North American centers, simply because of the amount of time that they've been doing it. When a client from Southeast Asia is looking at an aircraft and looking for a completion or refurbishment, that is part of the process. We work together to get the right designer, and then based on that design and the aircraft type, we can advise which completion centers should be subject to the RFQ. And it may include HAECO.
All right, so it's just the one that you're aware of then, is that it?
That is for Airbus and Boeings. There are other facilities in Singapore. There's also very good support facilities within the Middle East. But when you're doing a complete refurbishment or a complete completion center, there are not that many centers around the world that can actually do that kind of work.
I guess all of the completion work has to be approved under a Part 21 type of approval, yeah?
Absolutely. So it depends, again, what country that you're going to be registering the aircraft in. So the Chinese, the Vietnamese, the Thais all have different regulations, but you can very broadly say that they're similar to EASA, which is Europe, or similar to the FAA, but there are going to be differences. So you have to be very much aware of that. And it depends on where the client actually wishes to register their aircraft. And to be fair, the requirements to register the aircraft, for example, in mainland China, are a little bit more complicated than doing it in the United States, simply because it's a different regulatory system. But if you understand this and you take that into account from the very beginning, it's not a problem.
Okay, have you any questions from the floor, from the audience for Tom on aircraft completion? We'd like to hear your input for this final presentation. I'm sure you all have plans to buy one of these things in the next couple of weeks. So you have questions for Tom, I'm sure, about the finish. No? All right. On that note, I'm going to hand back to Taki for the final wrap up of today's presentation, if that's okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. And thank you, Alan, for moderating the event today. Really appreciate it. I think we had a really interesting session today with expert speakers and fantastic presentations. A big thank you to APTN for hosting us, and of course to the speakers for contributing today with their expertise and knowledge from so many different time zones. I really appreciate your contribution. You will receive copies of the presentations very soon, within the next couple of days, and also the recording, the video of the event, in case you want to watch it again, or you may have missed the presentation. And please take a look at the new website of aeropodium.com for information on forthcoming events. The next event is next week, and then another webinar in April. But for more information, please take a look at the website. There are many events coming up. Thank you very much. Stay safe and keep in touch. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.